I felt that Kentucky last year under Mark Pope did as good a job as any program in college basketball at allocating its money properly and making sure that it was building a team and not just accumulating talent. The Wildcats are doing the same thing so far this year. Mark Pope got an outstanding point guard from Pitt in Jalen Lowe. And earlier on Monday, he received a commitment from a great utility player from Alabama in Muhammad Diabate. The pieces are starting to look like they're going to fit for Kentucky. And look, the pieces are going to change every single day. But you look at what this team obviously has returning next year. There's a lot of reasons to be optimistic if you're a Kentucky fan. And Kentucky, I'm sure, is still going to be active in the transfer portal and continually active in the transfer portal. But look, here's the bottom line. If Kentucky can get guys back who still have returning eligibility, you got a nucleus in place before we're even looking at freshmen, where you've got Brandon Garrison, you've got Muhammad Diabate, you've got Colin Chandler, Otego Way, and Jalen Lowe. That's a pretty good place to start if you're Mark Pope right now, and it's only April the 8th. Now, Ian Jackson from North Carolina entered the transfer portal on Monday, and according to multiple sources, one school that's going to be firmly in the mix for Ian Jackson is St. John's. And St. John's, to me, is a program that is going to be real interesting to watch with the transfer portal over the next couple of weeks. St. John's made major headlines by getting Joe Sansanin from Arizona State, by getting Bryce Hopkins from Providence. Rick Pitino was at the Naismith Awards breakfast on Sunday, and he told me St. John's needs 2 more guards. I can tell you what I know. St. John's is going to be firmly in the mix for Ian Jackson. St. John's also, according to other sources that I've talked to, is going to be right there in the mix with Xavion Lee from Princeton. I think you could see Duke and Florida also in play for Lee. And I know that Isaiah Sellers from Stanford is going to be taking a visit to St. John's this weekend. If St. John's can get 2 of those guards or even 3 of those guards, you're looking at a top 5 to 16 to start next year. Because I look at the chemical makeup of this roster, and I believe I had St. John's 16. You've got Simeon Wilcher and Joe Sansanin in terms of your guards, and you've got Hopkins and Ejiofor up front. If Rick Pitino can add 2 to 3 more capable perimeter players, I don't know if St. John's is going to win 31 games like it did last year, but St. John's will have a chance to be a more complete team because of depth, because of shooting, because of balance. So these are the players you want to keep an eye on right now for St. John's in the transfer portal. Ian Jackson from North Carolina, Isaiah Sellers from Stanford, an underrated shooter this year in the ACC, and Xavion Lee from Princeton, who is going to be heavily courted by a number of teams. Florida for sure. We were just talking about how the Gators need a guard, and you also can't count out Duke, who I expect to be active as well in the transfer portal with the resources that they have. But this is going to be a very interesting time to be a St. John's fan because the bar has been raised. And St. John's is a couple of players away from being a top 10, top 5, top 6 team in college basketball next year.